My boss's son fired me on his first day. We're streamlining. You're not essential, he laughed. I smiled and said, good luck. The next morning, investors pulled out, and his father screamed, what did you do? That was our key to the deal. He had no idea that I still remember the way he laughed. Not the kind of laugh you share over an inside joke or a good story, no. This was different. Cold, sharp, dismissive. I was pouring myself a cup of stale coffee in the break room when Tyler, the new acting CEO, and more importantly, the founder's only son, strolled in like he owned the place. Technically, now he did. He didn't say hello. He didn't introduce himself. He just leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes roaming the room like he was sizing up cattle. You're Sarah, right? His voice was casual, almost bored. I turned, forcing a polite smile. Yes. Nice to meet you, Tyler. Welcome aboard. He smirked like he was already tired of me. Can you come to my office in 5 minutes? Bring your laptop. It wasn't a question. I felt the prickle of unease immediately. After 11 years at Cartwright Industries, you learn to recognize the early signs of trouble. And something about the way he said it, so clipped, so disinterested, made my stomach knot. 5 minutes later, I stepped into his office. He didn't even offer me a seat. He just tapped his pen against the glossy desk, a self-satisfied rhythm. We're streamlining, he said, with the casual air of someone announcing a lunch special. New leadership, new direction. We need lean, agile teams. You're not essential. Then he laughed. That sharp, mocking sound again, like he couldn't quite believe he had to explain himself. For a second, the world blurred. Not essential? I had built the client relations department from the ground up, brought in major accounts when the company was still fighting to stay afloat, stayed late through 3 corporate mergers, 2 restructurings, and more sleepless nights than I cared to count. I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled. A calm, polite, deliberate smile. Good luck, Tyler, I said softly. And I meant it, just not in the way he thought. I packed up my desk in silence. My colleagues watched from their cubicles, wide-eyed and whispering behind their hands. Some looked like they wanted to protest, but no one moved. I didn't blame them. In environments like this, survival often depends on staying invisible. As I carried the cardboard box to my car, memories flooded me. The late nights, the impossible deadlines, the personal sacrifices. I had missed birthdays, anniversaries, even my own divorce hearing because the company needed me. And now all that loyalty was reduced to a 5-minute conversation and a cruel laugh. But strangely, I didn't feel anger. Not yet. I felt something else. A quiet certainty that Tyler had just made a mistake he couldn't undo. Because what he didn't know, what he hadn't even bothered to learn, was that I wasn't just a middle manager. I was the keystone holding up the company's biggest investor relationship. We were weeks away from closing a multi-million-dollar expansion deal with All In Ventures, a deal that hinged entirely on the trust I had built with their partners over years of careful negotiation. There was a clause in the preliminary agreement, one I had personally insisted on during a tense late-night call with their lead counsel. Any material changes to key personnel would require immediate renegotiation or avoid the deal entirely. And now with one arrogant decision and a laugh, Tyler had triggered that clause. He just didn't know it yet. As I sat in my car, the city lights blurring into soft streaks beyond the windshield, my phone buzzed. It was Lauren, one of the junior associates I had mentored for years. Sarah, is it true? She whispered into the phone, like speaking louder would make it worse. It's true, I said simply. I'm out. A pause. Then, with a shaky voice, you were the only reason Orland trusted us. I closed my eyes. I know. Another pause, heavier this time. What's going to happen now? I opened my eyes, staring into the quiet, indifferent night. I guess, I said slowly. They're about to find out what happens when you remove the wrong piece from the foundation. Lauren said nothing. She didn't need to. As I hung up, a small part of me, the part that had been so tired for so long, felt a strange bittersweet relief. It was over, or at least my part of it was for now. Because Tyler's first day in charge wasn't going to be remembered for his bold leadership, or his streamlined vision. It was going to be remembered for something else entirely. And tomorrow, when the investors called, when the board demanded answers, he would realize just how essential I had really been. I didn't sleep much that night. I didn't toss and turn either. I just laid there staring at the ceiling, feeling the strange humming tension in the air, the kind you get right before a storm breaks. By 7 a.m. I was sitting at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold in front of me, scrolling absent-mindedly through news alerts on my phone. Nothing yet. No signs of trouble. Maybe, I thought, they'll patch it up before it gets worse. But deep down, I knew better. At 8:13 a.m., my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Lauren. Lauren, they're panicking. Investors were supposed to call at 9. Tyler's been in a conference room with legal since 7:30. I smiled faintly, feeling the first real ripple of satisfaction since the moment he fired me. I could picture it perfectly. Tyler pacing the glass conference room, trying to bluff his way through a crisis he didn't even fully understand. Legal flipping through contracts, finding the clause, the one I had insisted on, staring at it in growing horror. I sipped my cold coffee. The day was only beginning. At 8:45 a.m., another message came through. This time from Matt, an old friend in the finance department. Matt, Sarah, they're losing it. Board members are already calling in. They heard about the firing yesterday, and now they're asking how it affects the All-in deal. I leaned back in my chair. It was happening even faster than I expected. You see, All-in Ventures wasn't just any investor. They were the kind of group that made companies like Cartwright Industries. Their name alone opened doors. And Tyler's arrogance hadn't just jeopardized a deal, it had shaken their trust. By 9:05 a.m., the fallout began in earnest. Lauren messaged again. Lauren, investors on the call now. Tyler is stammering. Mr. Cartwright just stormed in. That made me sit up straight. Mr. Cartwright, Tyler's father, had been semi-retired for a year now, traveling between the company's global offices, letting Tyler earn his stripes. He hadn't planned to be in the building this morning. The fact that he was meant things were worse than I thought. At 9:21 a.m., Lauren sent a final text. Lauren, you're not going to believe this. Mr. Cartwright screamed at Tyler. What did you do? That was our key to the deal. The whole office heard it. I let out a slow breath, feeling a mixture of sadness and grim satisfaction. It wasn't just about the deal. It was about everything I had built over the past decade. The trust, the relationships, the foundation that had made Cartwright Industries strong. And Tyler had kicked it all aside without even asking who had put it there. At 9:30 a.m., my own phone rang, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won again. Sarah, it's Mr. Cartwright. His voice was tight, strained, a man barely holding himself together. I need to speak with you, he said. Today? Please. I paused, letting the silence stretch. I could almost hear the desperation bleeding through the phone. About what? I asked, my voice calm. The All-in Ventures deal, he said immediately. They're reconsidering. They said the termination of key personnel violates preliminary agreements. They want a meeting with you. Only you. They won't speak to anyone else. Another long silence. Please, Sarah, he added. We didn't realize I cut him off gently. You didn't ask. He exhaled a heavy breath. You're right. And Tyler. Tyler didn't understand. I thought he was ready. I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. I'll come in, I said finally, on one condition. Anything. He said without hesitation. I deal directly with you, I said. Not Tyler. Another beat of silence, then agreed. I ended the call and set my phone down carefully, my hand steady. It wasn't anger I felt. It wasn't even vindication. It was something quieter, deeper, a sense of clarity. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing approval or recognition. I was standing in the value I knew I brought to the table. And if they wanted me back, even temporarily, they would meet me there on my terms. As I got dressed, pulling on a sharp, simple suit, I caught my reflection in the mirror. There were lines at the corners of my eyes now. A little more silver near my temples. Proof, I thought, of every battle I had fought quietly while others claimed the victories. Today would be different. Today, I wouldn't fight for a seat at the table. Today, I was the table. And Tyler, poor, arrogant Tyler, was about to find out exactly what it meant to lose someone who had been essential all along. The lobby was almost painfully bright when I walked in, sunlight bouncing off the polished marble floors. It felt strange stepping back into Cartwright Industries, not as an employee, not exactly, but as something different, something stronger. The receptionist looked up and immediately straightened. "Miss Bennett, Sarah," she stammered. "Mr. Cartwright is expecting you. 11th floor." I nodded once. Calm. As the elevator doors closed behind me, I caught my reflection in the gleaming steel. Composed, sharp, unreadable. Exactly how I needed to be today. When the doors opened, I stepped into the executive floor, and the shift in atmosphere was immediate. Conversations dropped to whispers. Heads turned. People knew. Not just about what had happened, but about why I was here now. Tyler was standing near the glass conference room, arms crossed, fake laughing at something a junior executive said. When he saw me, the color drained from his face. He quickly masked it with a smirk. "Look who's back," he called out, loud enough for half the floor to hear. Couldn't stay away. I didn't stop walking, didn't answer, didn't even blink. I just moved past him, the soft click of my heels the only sound in the sudden silence. Let him flail. Let him scramble. His words couldn't touch me anymore. Mr. Cartwright met me outside his office. He looked older than the last time I saw him. Tired, frayed around the edges in a way no expensive suit could hide. "Sarah?" he said quietly, offering his hand. I shook it firmly, but without warmth. There were still things that needed to be said. Later. For now, we had a deal to save. Inside his office, the windows framed the city skyline like a painting. He gestured for me to sit. "I'm sorry for how this was handled," he began, voice low. "You didn't deserve it." I let the silence stretch a moment longer before nodding once. Acknowledgement. Not forgiveness. Not yet. He cleared his throat, laying a thick file on the desk between us. "The all-in team is waiting for a call. They're ready to pull out entirely, unless you're personally involved. I've managed to buy us a few hours." I flipped open the file. Panic was all over it. Hastily written notes, amended contracts, emails sent at 2 a.m., begging for reconsideration. Amateur hour. I closed the file calmly. "I'll talk to them," I said. "But before that, I need it in writing." He didn't hesitate. Already printed and waiting was a letter formalizing my authority over the all-in deal without interference from anyone, especially Tyler. I scanned it carefully, signed it. Only then did I allow myself a small, almost imperceptible breath of relief. "Let's get started," I said. He nodded, reaching for the speakerphone. Before he could dial, there was a sharp knock at the door, and Tyler barged in without waiting for an answer. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, looking directly at me. "You're going to let her enough," Mr. Cartwright barked, voice like a whip crack. Tyler recoiled, blinking. "I trusted you," Mr. Cartwright continued, his voice shaking not with anger but disappointment. "I trusted you to lead, to respect the people who built this company. And instead, you tried to gut it like a toy you didn't understand." Tyler opened his mouth, but Mr. Cartwright cut him off again. "You fired the one person holding together our most important partnership. You didn't even read the personnel clauses. You risked the future of this company for what? Your ego?" The room crackled with tension. I stayed silent, letting Mr. Cartwright fight his own battle. "You're suspended from all decision-making effective immediately," Mr. Cartwright said. "Legal is drafting the paperwork now. If the all-in deal falls through because of you, the board will vote on your removal." Tyler's face turned a mottled red. For the first time he looked genuinely stunned, like the reality of what he'd done was finally breaking through the walls of entitlement he'd lived behind for so long. "This isn't over," he hissed at me as he stormed out. I didn't respond. It wasn't worth it. Once the door slammed behind him, Mr. Cartwright sagged into his chair. "I should have seen it coming," he muttered. I looked at him steadily. "Blind faith is dangerous," I said quietly, "especially when it blinds you to the truth." He gave a weary nod, then punched in the number for All-In Ventures. As the line rang, I straightened my shoulders, ready to step back into the arena. Not for them, not for him, but for myself. Because sometimes the most powerful statement you can make isn't slamming the door on the way out. It's walking back through it stronger than ever and setting new terms. The call connected. The room fell silent. It was time. "Good morning," I said, my voice even as the speakerphone clicked in Word. I could hear the faint background noise of an office on the other side. Papers rustling, keyboards tapping, the muted tension of people holding their breath. Sarah came the voice of Jonathan Pierce, the lead partner at All-In Ventures. He didn't sound angry. Worse, he sounded cold. "We were surprised to hear about your departure," he said carefully. I glanced at Mr. Cartwright. He was sitting rigidly in his chair, his hands balled into fists on top of his desk. He didn't say a word. "My departure," I said calmly, "was not voluntary, nor was it strategic. I can assure you of that." There was a pause. I could almost feel them weighing my words, deciding whether to trust me. Jonathan spoke again, voice clipped. "We were under the impression that you were an integral part of this deal, that the trust we extended was in large part because of your personal stewardship." "You were correct," I said simply, "and I take that responsibility seriously." Another silence, the heavy expectant kind that tightens around your throat. They were giving me a chance. One and only one. I leaned forward slightly, my voice steady. "The conditions we negotiated were based not just on numbers or promises, but on the relationship we built over the last 2 years. A relationship based on consistency, transparency, and mutual respect. I'm here today to ensure that remains intact." Jonathan exhaled audibly through the speaker. "Then tell us this. If leadership at Cartwright Industries is unstable, how can we trust that our investment will be protected?" A brutal question. A fair one. I didn't flinch. "Leadership isn't a title," I said, my voice calm but firm. "It's accountability. It's action. I'm still here, still standing by every commitment we made. The missteps of one individual, someone who is no longer involved, don't erase the foundation we built. If anything, it proves how critical it is to trust the right people, not just the ones with fancy titles." Another beat of silence. Mr. Cartwright sat frozen, almost afraid to breathe. Finally, Jonathan's voice returned slightly softer. "We appreciate your honesty, Sarah." Before I could answer, another voice joined the call, one I hadn't expected. Rebecca Lynn, All-In's chief legal advisor. "I reviewed the personnel clauses in the preliminary agreement," she said crisply. "We are well within our rights to walk away with no penalty." "I know," I said simply. Another pause. "But," she continued, "we also recognize that mistakes happen. Provided that Sarah remains the primary liaison moving forward with contractual authority, we are willing to proceed on one condition." I raised an eyebrow, though they couldn't see it. "What condition?" I asked. "That Cartwright Industries issues a formal acknowledgement of the mistake and recommits to the leadership continuity clause in writing." I didn't look at Mr. Cartwright. I didn't need to. This was the price of trust lost, and the only way to rebuild it. "You'll have it by end of day," I said. Jonathan cleared his throat. "In that case, we're willing to continue negotiations." The tension in the room finally cracked like ice breaking underfoot. Mr. Cartwright sagged slightly in his chair, relief washing over him in a visible wave. "Thank you, Sarah," Jonathan added, his voice warmer now. "We trusted you before. You've only reinforced why." The call ended with formalities and promises of next steps, but I barely heard them. All I could focus on was the steady thrum of adrenaline in my veins, not from fear, but from the knowledge that I had held the line, that I had been tested, and I hadn't flinched. When the call finally disconnected, Mr. Cartwright exhaled loudly. "You saved us," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You really—" I held up a hand. "I didn't do it for you," I said quietly. "I did it for the people who built this company long before Tyler decided to tear it apart." He nodded slowly, shame flickering across his face. "You deserve better," he said. "I know," I replied. I stood gathering my notes, the finality of the moment settling over me like a second skin. As I moved toward the door, Mr. Cartwright spoke again. "Sarah," he said, "we need you here permanently, not just to fix this, but to lead, to help rebuild." I paused, hand on the doorframe. "I'll consider it," I said over my shoulder, and I meant it. But if I returned, it would be on my terms. No more silent sacrifices, no more invisible labor. If they wanted me to rebuild what Tyler almost destroyed, they'd have to recognize the difference between someone who inherits power and someone who earns it. And this time, I wouldn't let them forget it. The rest of that day moved in a blur. By late afternoon, the new paperwork was signed. Orland Ventures had officially agreed to continue, and the company's board sent out a carefully worded internal memo. Effective immediately, Sarah Bennett will serve as interim head of client relations, reporting directly to the CEO. It was a victory, on paper at least. But anyone who's ever worked in a place like Cartwright Industries knows victories aren't always the end of the war. Sometimes, they just mark the beginning of a new kind of battle. The first hint came barely an hour later. An email from HR popped up on my screen requesting a routine meeting to reconfirm leadership roles in light of recent changes. It sounded innocent enough, but the timing was too perfect, too neat. I responded politely, setting the meeting for the next morning. Then I sat back in my chair and thought about what was really happening. Tyler might have been publicly sidelined, but men like him didn't just fade quietly into the background. No. They regrouped. They plotted, and if he couldn't confront me directly, he would find another way. That evening, after most of the staff had gone home, I walked the halls of the office, letting my footsteps echo against the polished floors. The place felt different now. Not better, not yet, just exposed. Like all the polite smiles and corporate slogans had been stripped away, and all that was left was the raw machinery underneath. Power, ambition, fear. I paused outside the break room, hearing low voices inside. "I'm telling you," a woman's voice whispered, sharp and nervous. "She's not going to last." "Tyler's got people still backing him," another voice answered. Lower, male, smug. "Doesn't matter if she saved the deal. She's a liability now. Too much attention." I turned and walked away before they saw me. I didn't need to know their names. I didn't need to confront them. I already understood. Tyler had started something the day he fired me. A rot. And cutting him out wasn't enough to cure it. He had left behind people who benefited from the chaos, people who had hitched their futures to his rise, and now they were scrambling to protect themselves. By the time I got home that night, the weight of it all settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. I sat by the window, staring out at the city lights, thinking I had a choice. I could walk away, take the win, leave the mess behind, start fresh somewhere else. Plenty of companies would kill to have someone who had just salvaged a multi-million-dollar partnership under pressure, or I could stay. Stay and fight. Stay and rebuild. But rebuilding meant more than paperwork. It meant cutting out the rod at the roots. It meant long nights, tough conversations, enemies hiding in plain sight. It meant becoming a leader, not just in title, but in truth. Was I ready for that? I didn't know. Not yet. But I knew one thing for certain. If I stayed, I wouldn't survive by being quiet anymore. I wouldn't survive by playing nice with people who smiled to my face and sharpened knives behind my back. I would survive by being exactly who they feared the most. A woman who knew her worth, who didn't flinch, who kept receipts. At midnight, as the city pulsed quietly around me, I pulled out a notebook and started writing. Everything I had seen, every whisper, every strange delay, every suspicious change to files and meetings. A paper trail of shadows. Because if Tyler or anyone loyal to him thought they could erase me with rumors and whispers, they had underestimated me all over again. And next time, when they tried to come for me, I would be ready. The battle wasn't over. It was just entering a new phase. And this time, I wasn't the one walking into traps. I was the one setting them. The next morning, I walked into the HR meeting 15 minutes early. The conference room was cold, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that made everything feel sharper, more brittle. I took a seat at the far end of the table, notebook in hand, face calm. If they were setting a trap, they would find I'd brought my own. 2 HR representatives arrived, polite, overly formal. And just behind them, to no surprise, Tyler slinked into the room, a smug smile plastered across his face. He wasn't supposed to be here, but clearly he thought he still had moves to play. "Sarah," one of the HR reps began, smoothing out a folder. "We're here to discuss some concerns that have been raised regarding your recent behavior." I tilted my head slightly, pretending to be intrigued. "Concerns?" I echoed. The second rep, a woman named Marla whom I'd worked with for years, looked genuinely uncomfortable. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She didn't need to. I already knew what this was. Tyler shifted forward eagerly. "There have been questions," he said, voice syrupy sweet, "about your ability to manage high-pressure relationships. Some feel that your recent actions, while successful in the short term, might suggest instability." Marla finished quietly. There it was, the classic smear tactic. Plant a seed of doubt. Whisper about instability just enough to taint someone's reputation without any hard evidence, and then step back, pretending it had all been concern for the company's best interests. I smiled, a small knowing smile that made Tyler's smugness falter for just a second. I opened my notebook, flipping neatly to the pages I had filled the night before. "Before we proceed," I said, voice crisp, "I'd like to submit some documentation for the record." The HR reps blinked. Tyler froze. I slid the pages across the table. Detailed notes of every questionable interaction I'd witnessed over the past week. Mysterious email delays, files missing authorization, false rumors seeded through specific departments, dates, times, witnesses. "I've also reported potential IT security breaches," I added smoothly. "Attached are confirmation emails from our systems department. As of last night, an internal audit has been initiated at the CEO's request." Now it was Marla's turn to look shocked. You reported this already?" she asked, glancing nervously at Tyler. "Of course," I said. "Weeks ago, when the first signs appeared. I take my responsibilities seriously." The silence that followed was absolute. Tyler opened his mouth, struggling for words, but no defense came. He had played his hand too soon, and I had been ready. I leaned back slightly in my chair, watching the realizations sink into his face like ink into water. He was exposed, not just to me, but now to HR, to the systems department, and soon to the board. He had underestimated me every step of the way, and now there was nowhere left to hide. Mr. Cartwright walked into the room moments later, summoned by Marla's silent, desperate text. When he saw the documents on the table, and the look on Tyler's face, he didn't need an explanation. "I think this meeting is over," Mr. Cartwright said coldly. Tyler turned, sputtering. "Dad, listen. It's not what it looks like. She's just you," Mr. Cartwright cut him off, "are done." There was no yelling this time. No dramatics. Just a simple final statement of fact. HR escorted Tyler out of the building that afternoon. No goodbye party. No golden handshake. Just silence. And me? I stayed. Not because I needed to prove anything anymore, but because leadership isn't about surviving storms. It's about standing tall in their aftermath when others have fled. In the days that followed, the office changed in ways I hadn't thought possible. People looked me in the eye again. Departments started working together, instead of hoarding information. For the first time in a long time, there was hope. And on Friday morning, Mr. Cartwright called me into his office. There was no ceremony, no staged applause. Just a simple letter slid across the desk. Chief Operating Officer. Effective immediately. I looked up at him. "You earned it," he said simply. I took the letter, folded it once, and slid it into my bag. No tears, no speeches. Just a quiet, steady acceptance of what I had fought for and won. Later that evening, as I left the office, the city stretched out before me, glittering with possibilities. I knew challenges would come. There would always be new storms to weather, new battles to fight. But I also knew something far more important now. That strength isn't in how loud you shout. It's in how quietly you refuse to break. And no one, not even a boss's spoiled son, could ever take that away from me again.